The time has come for us to finally openly acknowledge the painful, unpleasant truth, and that is that the Ukraine war is not going to be resolved the way we want. Ukraine is not going to win the war. The sooner we come to this realization and accept the ground truth reality, the sooner and the better we're going to be able to minimize the damage and do the best we can to take care of the Ukrainian people and make sure that they don't lose any more in this war. Now, as we've been talking about many times here on this channel, we've been laying out the military reasons why that the Ukraine offensive this past summer never had a chance. It did not accomplish its goals, no matter how many times so many senior officials kept telling you over and over, just give it a little more time. It just needs a little bit more of this. There were very practical, identifiable reasons why it was never going to work. Now I think that reality is starting to sink in, even at the policy level, and that includes here in Washington, D.C. First of all, let me kind of set the stage for you for what's going on at the congressional level where the money is coming into play. This was last night by Norah O'Donnell.
Breaking news now on Capitol Hill as House Republicans have passed an emergency funding bill for Israel tonight, providing $14 billion in aid. But it does face opposition from the White House and Senate leaders who also wanted billions in aid for Ukraine in this bill.
With two major allies now at war, the White House is asking Congress for $14 billion in emergency funding for Israel, $61 billion for Ukraine, and $9 billion for humanitarian assistance. But the bill proposed by the new Republican Speaker, Mike Johnson, strips out the humanitarian and Ukraine funding and cuts $14 billion from the IRS.
And that was the easiest and largest pile of money that's sitting there for us to be able to pay for this immediate obligation.
The Congressional Budget Office projected this week that shrinking the IRS would actually add to the deficit.
This is Republicans playing politics with aid to Israel.
That bill may have just passed the House a short time ago, but the White House has threatened a veto, and the bill has been declared dead on arrival in the Senate, where many Democrats and many Republicans want to send funding to both Israel and Ukraine right away. How they'll get there, Norah, is very unclear right now.
Or if they'll get there is very unclear right now. One thing is clear is that there is a great deal of antagonism in the Congress between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, between the Republican Party and the Republican Party, between the House and the Senate, between the Congress and the White House. What's underscoring all this is that there is no clear drive for where this money needs to go, or even if it should go. That's very telling, because earlier in this war, nobody questioned anything. It was how much you need. Let me pull up my checkbook. What do you need? And they'll just write it out. No one even questioned it. Either party, either chamber. They both sent the stuff forward. The president, they were all aligned. Now they're not. There's a reason why they're not, because all those things we've been talking about in terms of what's happening on the battlefield are becoming more and more evident and harder for even the biggest supporters of Ukraine to deny. Now, there's a report also yesterday at the White House where John Kirby was asked about this situation. And I want you to watch this clip very carefully, not just for what he says, but watch his body language as he's being asked the question.
The president continues to say that the United States will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. But is there, in the months and years ahead, is there going to be a updated strategy required? Perhaps more advanced weapons, or perhaps more of an appetite for negotiations?
Well, certainly we'll let Ukrainian leaders speak to their progress or lack thereof. That's really for them to talk about. I think it underscores how important it is that we continue to support Ukraine. I can't stand here today and tell you that it's going to lead to this particular weapon system or this new capability. We are evolving and have evolved what we've provided Ukraine as the war itself has evolved, and I suspect that process will continue. It would be eminently easier for us to do that if Congress would pass the supplemental funding that supports Ukraine, because it's not only about capabilities for Ukraine, there's a big chunk of that goes to replenishment ability for U.S. For our own inventory.
Now, he is interested there, and that a lot of that money actually isn't going to Ukraine per se, but towards replenishing our inventory. And by the way, this is also an important point, because it's listed by many in the White House often that they try to say, no, we need to get this money because it's not just that we're giving all this stuff to Ukraine. We're actually replenishing our own stuff and getting new weapons made by American companies and jobs. Okay, the Ukraine war is not a jobs program for America, on first point. Second point, much more practically, these things take years to recover. Okay, we've already sent 5,000 total military vehicles ground support vehicles, tanks, trucks, all those kinds of things, 5,000 of them. You don't replace those by passing a supplemental bill. Those things take years to be replaced because they have to be built. The factories are not large enough don't have enough capacity to make a lot of these things fast. It just takes a lot of time. So it's already going to be many years at full capacity before we even replace what we've lost. Ergo, our national security capacity is now lower than it was 21 years ago when this war started, and will continue to be lower if we don't put the brakes on pretty quick. Now, that's what the situation is here in Washington, D.C. In Ukraine, there is an additional dynamic unfolding that I think is also starting to get a lot of people's attention. Now, Zelensky has always been, from day one, say we're going to win this, and of course, he was initially hailed as being the next, major war leader, and he was trying to be like the British, leaders of wars past, and he was, likened to a lot of those leaders, and now then the tarnish is kind of coming off of that. He used to be invited to parliaments around the world to speak, high-profile engagements. And then all of a sudden that starts kind of falling off the table and people start saying, yeah, no, we don't really want you to come and talk to this. And it's been falling lower and lower. Let's just look at the Time magazine covers. First of all, from the beginning of this year, when he was named as the person of the year for 2022, and you see all these, glowing kinds of adulation and, again, this heroic look and all this. Now then, here's the current Time magazine on the right hand. And you see, nobody believes like I do. Nobody. Well, there's a lot of truth to that because nobody does believe in that anymore. And yet, unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be getting that message because here's what he said also last night.
I have confidence in you, just like on February 24th. I am confident that Ukraine will definitely win. Be confident in yourselves. I am proud of you, Ukrainian people. I am proud of you, Ukrainian soldier. Glory to Ukraine.
Look, I'm sorry, but we just got to say this because it's starting to be more and more evidently true. In the latter days of Germany's war in World War II, Hitler just wouldn't accept the reality, and he just kept saying over and over, "No, we're just going to move this division here and that division there. We're still going to win, and we're still going to do this stuff," even though it was clearly evident militarily the war was lost. And now, unfortunately, it is as uncomfortable as it is for us to say, Zelensky is starting to fall into that same pattern. And you see from his own mouth, he's saying these things. I'm still confident that we're going to win. You shouldn't be. He should not still be confident that they're going to win because there's no factual evidence to support it. Not only did they fail to dent the lines of the Russian forces in this whole summer offensive, which itself had a half a year to prepare before, the Russian side has also expanded its army. Now they're going to be close by the end of next month to potentially have an additional 400,000 more soldiers than they had at the start of the year, whereas Ukraine is now much smaller. They aren't able to replace the casualties. That's on the manpower issue. Then there's the equipment issue. They lost all kinds of armored vehicles in the failed attempt to punch through the Russian lines. And right now, there is no promises on the table, much less in the process of being delivered, for them to get enough capacity to even think about wanting to launch another one. Thirdly, is what we just saw on this from the Congress. There is much lower appetite for throwing money out there. And now instead of having another $113 billion like the U.S. sent last year, they're only asking for $60 billion. And I think the chances of them getting that are very remote. I bet they'll be lucky to even get half of that money once they finally get this unwind in the U.S. Congress and all the complications that go along with that. I don't think that they're going to physically completely cut them off. I don't think they would do that. But I do think that it's going to be significantly reduced. And I assure you that signal is being seen around the world at other Western capitals, none of whom want to keep giving their equipment. They don't want to keep giving their money because they recognize the same thing. So they're looking for any excuse to not have to give a lot of that stuff. Everything shows that this war cannot be won militarily. And it's now, it's just beyond the point to where we can deny this. It's now evidently clear. And for the sake of the Ukrainian people, for the sake of even NATO cohesion, but mostly for the Ukrainian people. That's the one I'm worried about the most. It's time to say, all right, we got to switch gears. We got to do something different. Just throwing more money, just throwing even a smaller number of tanks, F-16 fighters, that's not going to change the tune. You had the commander-in-chief Zaluzhny for the Ukraine forces in an Economist magazine article yesterday admit finally that the offensive did not accomplish anything, and now they're in a stalemate. And he asked for 5 different categories of additional funding. But look, folks, it's not coming. They're not going to get a bunch more armor and tanks. They're not going to get air defense capabilities in the size, in the amount that they're looking for. They're not going to get the mine clearing equipment that they're asking for in the volume that they're at, that they need it, because it's just not evident. It's just not available unless other countries want to get rid of theirs, and they don't, because they know that if something happens and they need it, they have to have it. There's just not spare capacity. We already gave the spare capacity. So all the things Zaluzhny says he needs, there were 5 of them, they're just not going to be there. It's not going to be found. So that tells you the war won't be won. Now, that's even by their commanding general. So it's now time for the Western world to catch up to this and to start doing the painful, necessary steps. And that means we have to shift gears to seek a new strategy, something that can work. And listen, folks, I'm going to tell you what it is, and you're not going to like it. And nobody who's a big fan of Ukraine is going to like it either. We're going to have to negotiate some kind of end of hostilities with Russia, and that means they're going to be able to keep some of their territory. Now, Americans are already starting to get on board with that. There was a poll out just a couple of days ago that shows that there is increasing, month by month, increasing percentage of Americans who say, yeah, I think we've done too much on the one hand already, and I think that it's time that even if Ukraine has to cede some land to get peace, I think that's the better path. So Americans are coming around to this. And I assure you that path is only going to continue. Those trends are going to both keep going in that direction, because the bottom line on the battlefield is not going to turn around. So Washington has to start seeking a negotiated settlement, and that means having hard conversations with Zelensky and saying, bud, this is not coming. You're not going to get this money for as long as it takes, meaning with no strings attached and forever. And that's going to be hard for him to do, because he's, like he just did yesterday, he keeps telling his people, no, we're going to win. I still have the confidence. And so how he's going to backtrack on that and how he's going to change course, I don't know. And that's something that he's going to have to come to grips with. But he is going to have to come to grips with it, folks. There's just no alternative now, because he can't change the reality to make it something he wants, because the conditions don't allow it. And I know this is hard for people to hear, but it's just where we are and what we're going to have to do. And I just hope and I pray that our leadership in Washington is willing to do the right thing, because the consequence of not doing that, the consequence of ignoring the reality and saying, no, we're just going to keep giving him money as long as he wants to fight, that means more Ukrainian people will die, more Ukrainian territory will be lost to Russia, and more civilians will be killed in the process. It won't change the outcome. The outcome is pretty much already set. Russia is not going to lose the territory that they have gained in this war. The longer we deny that, the worse we make it for Ukraine. So if we really care about Ukraine, we're going to have to do the hard, right thing. And that's your deep dive for today. Folks, I appreciate you coming. I hope you'll like and subscribe this and pass it on to other folks. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next deep dive. See you next time.